My name is DJV, and welcome to episode 4 of Low Key Track, the podcast where I talk about the least streamed song on an album. On today's episode, we're going to be looking at an album that was pretty much a core part of my summer soundtrack. Even though I missed their wave of popularity, I really enjoyed their most recent album. It is Vampire Weekend's Only God Was Above Us. For those of you who don't know who Vampire Weekend is, they're an indie pop rock band originally from New York City. They actually met as students at Columbia. And their critically acclaimed debut album came out in 2008. It had the singles A-Punk and Oxford Calm on it. So look those up. Maybe it'll give you some memories, take you back to that time. But yeah, their latest album is called Only God Was Above Us, came out in April. And it's been about 5 years since their previous album. So getting into the low-key track, it's actually the last track on the album. It's called Hope. Has about 3.2 million streams on it as of this recording. Unlike the most popular track, Capricorn, which was, I believe, the first single, and it also has about a little under 15 million streams, about 14.8, again, as of this recording. Both of them are fairly popular tracks, but Hope is definitely the least streamed song on the album, and I kind of want to understand why that is. Well, here's just what I think. Besides the fact that Vampire Weekend is not nearly as popular as they once were, it also doesn't help that the song is the last song on the album and the longest song on the album. I think it clocks into just under 8 minutes. But I think some additional context is helpful here too. So the first single for the album that came out was Capricorn. So I assume people that are hardcore Vampire Weekend fans or people that just were like, oh, Vampire Weekend, I haven't listened to them in a while. Let's see what they're up to. Probably clicked on it, and that's what drove up the streams of Capricorn, just to hear what they got. I think with Vampire Weekend, and this is just from an outsider's perspective, someone that, didn't really grow up on them, but, started to appreciate them later on. I do enjoy their ability to experiment with pop music. I think their sound is very indie pop, but also has a lot of interesting elements that they draw from other genres. So even on this album itself, I was hearing stuff like Irish folk music. I was hearing a little bit of hip hop, some trip hop, some more like funky bass lines. I heard a lot of cool stuff that they mixed in with their sound. They have a very, very clear sound, I think, and you just know when you hear it. And it could be either you really enjoy it and that's your sound, you stick with it, you love it, or maybe you're not a huge fan, or maybe you just had like a phase with it. There's no trouble any way you pick about it, but that's just what I think when it comes to Vampire Weekend. So going back to the low-key track, going into Hope, so giving up the fact that Capricorn was the first single that dropped for this album, it is, like I mentioned, the longest and last song of the album. It's about almost 8 minutes long, a little bit longer of an instrumental breaks throughout the track, and it's just kind of a slower track overall. And one other thing that I think is super important to point out is that if you're like me and this was your summer soundtrack, probably shouldn't have been your summer soundtrack. It's a very heavy album, and it's a very bleak album. Just listening to a lot of their older stuff and as well as this album, it's very clear that where Vampire Weekend's strengths lie are like obscure New York references mixed with just this melancholy and cynicism that just comes with life, and it's no different on this album. It has also a very nostalgic feel to it. You can hear a lot of cool elements from like 80s rock, and you could hear like not a little bit some like very light grungy notes on here. But ultimately, a lot of the songs tend to reminisce about a supposed better time in New York City, a lot of disappointment and a lot of sadness that comes with growing up. And throughout the album, there's this uneasiness and tension of there's really nothing you can do about what's going on in the world, and you kind of just have to accept it and disassociate entirely. A little bit ironic because I think even with this entire album, Hope itself, Ezra Koenig, the lead singer, he said in an interview that he didn't actually want to end the album on a pessimistic note, and even changed the second line of the song to match that vibe. So the first two lines of the song are, "The bull has gored the matador, the U.S. Army won the war." The original lyric was going to be, "The bull has gored the matador, the U.S. Army lost the war." So I think depending on how you look at it, it's very much indicative of Vampire Weekend songwriting where they leave just enough ambiguity so you can either give it your own interpretation of, oh, okay, this is something that's could be super positive, or just really, really sad if you think about it. And I'm gonna lean towards sad on this one. I think the entire album is kind of dressed up in these like happy pop melodies and this overall dancey, funky sound that comes associated with it. It reminds me actually a little bit of if you guys know "Hey Ya" by Andre 3000. I assume you do. Everybody knows that song. Even in "Bloom" by Nirvana, it's this element of like sounds like a great happier song, but if you really dig deep into it, it is very sad and very bleak. And that's what this album is. It's very nice, preppy, going on a little skip across the what's the word I'm looking for? Like skip across the lawn, skip across the field kind of pop music. And it talks about the fact that you can't do anything about the world and where it's going, and you kind of just have to accept that and continue to just do the best you can. Ultimately, some people are just okay with that and they go numb to it. Some people not really. I think when I was listening to this album, I was definitely more on the side of okay, this sounds nice. And then as I kind of dug deeper, looked at the lyrics a bit more, it got sadder and sadder, and I was listening to it a lot this week, leading into the recording of this episode, and it was a struggle, especially because I'm personally trying to overcome some barriers mentally, and I don't think this album helped. It's a great album, don't get me wrong, but in this case, I probably won't revisit it until I'm in a better headspace. Anyway, going back into Hope specifically, the song is about essentially letting it go. The whole thing just talks about there's so much going on in the world there, you can't control what happens. There's a certain class of people that basically control everything, and the enemy's invincible, as they say on the hook. I hope you let it go. Hope you let it go. The enemy's invincible. I hope you let it go. It captures this uneasiness. It captures this cynicism, nihilism, this philosophical feeling of just, okay, there's nothing for me in this life. So you learn to disassociate, and you learn to just keep, trekking on, doing what you got to do. The last point I kind of want to make about this track is that lyrically it is a bit repetitive. A lot of the songwriting on this album is pretty great. I really enjoy like Capricorn, for example, Gen X Cops, some of the lyrics on there talking about like police brutality, talking about how generational trauma and generational just apathy, I would say, because it seems what a main theme around this album is that every single generation kind of cycles through their own problems and their own whims and their own apologies. And it just seems like it's just the same thing. And it kind of showcases that as a species, we've been dealing with this our entire existence. And each generation claims they're going to change everything, but then ultimately they stumble into the same problems that humanity has always dealt with. The song itself, again, the hook, I said it earlier, it's a little bit repetitive. There's a lot of instrumental breaks in between, and it just kind of ends with them singing, I hope you let it go, which to me, it probably makes sense why it's the low-key track of the album, just because after listening to something that is this depressing and this bleak, it isn't great to just have this kind of repeat on end. Maybe it's very cathartic for you, and if it is, great, I love it. For me personally, I definitely probably when there was like a minute and a half, 2 minutes left, I kind of stopped the album and I'm like, okay, I think I've had enough of this. Would definitely revisit 100% in the near future. I think there's a lot of songs you could potentially put on like a day drinking playlist. I think there's songs you could put in just like kind of hanging out in the park. If you're in a very hipster neighborhood, I think this album will be very perfect for that. And if you have your little synth pop phase or your little grungy phase, I don't know if I'd say grungy, but definitely more synth poppy phase. If you're an indie girly or an indie guy, this is definitely an album for you. And And just, yeah, if you're listening to this album front to back, just know that the song is long, the song is a little bit repetitive, and it doesn't, even though Ezra has very good intentions with this, trying to make the song a little bit more optimistic, it may not completely lift your mood, just given, the nature of the album. So these are the reasons why I think Hope is the low-key track of Only God Was Above Us. If this is your favorite song on the album, great, that's awesome. As I mentioned on previous episodes, the purpose of music is really to just build a connection with yourself at a deeper level and find healthy ways to discover expression of the human experience. So thanks for listening to episode 4 of Low Key Track. It's available wherever you get your podcasts, and you can follow me on social media at Low Key Track. I also DJ at the Fake DJV, so go on and check out that page as well. And until next time, don't let meaning die in metaphors.